Chapter 1. How Robin had became an outlaw. In the days of King Harry II of England, he of the warring sons, there were certain forests in the north country set aside for the king's hunting, and no man might shoot deer therein, under penalty of death. These forests were guarded by the king's foresters, the chief of whom, in each wood, was no main man, but equal in authority to the sheriff in his walled town, or even to the Lord Bishop of his abbey. One of the greatest of royal preserves was Sherwood and Barnesdale forests, the two towns of Nottingham and Barnesdale. Here for some years dwelt one Soothe as head forester, with his good wife and son Robert. The boy had been born in the year 1160, stern records say, and Robin called Locksley, Rob of Locksley. He was a comely, well-knit stripling, and as soon as he was strong enough to walk, his chief delight was to go with his father into the forest. As soon as his right arm received thumb and sinew, he learned to draw the long bow, his speedy true arrow, while winter evenings his greatest joy was to hear his father tell of bold Wilhelm the Green, the outlaw, who for many summers defied the king's butchers and feasted with his men upon king's deer. And on other stormy days the boy learned to whittle out a straight shaft for the long bow and tip it with gray goose feathers. The fond mother sighed when she saw the boy's face light up at these woodland tales. She was of gentle birth, and had hoped to see her son famous at court or abbey. She taught him to read and to write, to doff his cap without awkwardness, and to answer directly and truthfully both lord and peasant. But the boy, although he took kindly to these lessons of breeding, was yet happiest when he had his beloved bow in hand and strolled at will, listening to the murmur of the trees. Two playmates had Rob in these lads' early days. One was Will Gamewell, his father's brother's son, who lived at Gamewell Lodge, hard by Nottingham town. The other was Marian Fitzwalter, only child of the Earl of Huntingdon. The castle of Huntingdon could be seen from the top of one of the tall trees in Sherwood. And on more than one bright day, Raj White's signal from this tree told Marian that he awaited her there. His father and her father were enemies. Some people whispered that Fitzhugh was the rightful Earl of Huntingdon, but that he had been defrauded out of his lands by Fitzwalter, who had won the king's favor by a crusade to the Holy Land. The little kid robber Marian for this enmity. However, it had arisen. They knew that the great green suit was open to them, and that the wide world was full of the scent of flowers and the song of birds. Days of youth speed all too swiftly, and troubled skies come all too soon. Rob's father had two other enemies besides Fitzwater, in the persons of the lame sheriff of Nottingham and the fat bishop of Hereford. These three enemies one day got possession of the king's ear, and whispered therein to such good purpose, Archie Fitzhugh was removed from his post of King's forester. He and his wife and Rob, and a youth of 19, were descended upon during a cold winter's evening, and dispossessed without warning. The sheriff arrested the forester for treason, of which, poor man, he was as guiltless as you or she, and carried him to Nottingham jail. Rob and his mother were sheltered overnight in the jail, also, but next morning were roughly bade to go about their business. Thereupon they turned for succor to their only kinsman, Squire George of Gamewell, who sheltered them in all kindness. But the shock and the winter night's journey proved too much for Dame Fitzhugh. She had not been strong for some time before leaving the forest. In less than 2 months she was no more. Rob felt as though his heart was broken at this loss. But scarcely had the first spring flowers begun to blossom upon her grave, when he met another crushing blow in the loss of his father. That stern man had died in prison before his accusers could agree upon the charges by which he was to be brought to trial. 2 years passed by. Roth's cousin was away at school, and Marian's father, who had learned of her friendship with Rob, had sent his daughter to the court of Queen Eleanor. So these years were lonely ones to the orphan lad. The bluff old squire was kind to him, but secretly could make nothing of one about brooding, and as though seeking for something he had lost. The truth is that Rob missed his old life in the forest no less than his mother's gentleness and his father's companionship. Every time he twanged the string of the long bow against his shoulder and heard the great goose shaft sing, it told him of happy days that he could not recall. One morning as Rob came into breakfast, his uncle greeted him with, "I have news for you, Rob, my lad." And the hardy old squire finished his draught of ale and set his pewter tankard down with a crash. "How may that be, Uncle Gilmore?" asked the young man. "Here's a chance to exercise your good long bow and win a pretty prize. The fair is on at Nottingham, and the sheriff proclaims an archer's tournament. The best fellows are to have places with the king's foresters, and the one who shoots straightest of all will win for prize a golden arrow. A useless bauble enough, just the thing for your old lady ye love. Why, boy? And why the same that boy?" Rob's eyes sparkled. "'Twere indeed worth shooting for, Uncle mine," he said. "I should dearly love to let arrow fly alongside another man, and a place among the foresters is what I have long desired. Will you let me try?" "To be sure," rejoined his uncle. "Well, I know that your good mother would have had me make a cloak of you. But well, I see that the greenwood is where you will pass your days. So here's luck to you in the bout." And a huge tankard came a third time into play. The young man thanked his uncle for his good wishes and set about making preparations for the journey. He traveled lightly, as you bow must needs have a new string, and his yard arrows must be of the straightest and soundest. One fine morning, a few days after, Rob might have been seen passing by Wavelopsley through Sherwood Forest to Nottingham town. Briskly walked he and gaily, for his hopes were high, and never an enemy had he in the wide world. But that was the very last morning in all his life when he was to lack an enemy. For as he went his way through Sherwood whistling a blithe tune, he came suddenly upon a group of foresters making merry beneath the spreading branches of an oak tree. They had a huge meat pie before them, and were washing down prodigious slices of it with net brown ale. One glance at the leader, and Rob knew at once that he had found an enemy. That was the man who had usurped his father's place as head forester, and who had roughly turned his mother out in the snow. But never a word said he for good or bad, and would have passed on his way, and not this man, clearing his throat with a huge gulp, bellowed out to my troth, "Here's a regular archer. But go you, my lad, with that twopenny bow and toy arrows, like he would shoot at Nottingham Fair." "How?" Sargar roar of laughter greeted his sally. Hal flushed, for he was mightily proud of his shooting. "My bow is as good as yours," he retorted, "and my shafts will carry as straight and as far. So I'll not take lessons of any of ye." They laughed again aloud at this, and the leader said, "With friend, some of your skill, and if you can hit the mark, here's 20 silver pennies for you. But if you hit it, net you are in for a sound drubbing for your pertness. Ahead, your own turbot." Quoth Rob in a fine rage. "May my head against that purse that I can hit it." "But it shall be as you say," retorted the forester angrily. "Your head for your saneness that you hit no right target. Now when that rise in the were herd of deer, den Grelkin can rise in Fendergurzer, there were king's deer. But at that distance seemed safe from any harm." The head forester pointed to them. "If your young arm could speed a shaft for half that distance, "I'd shoot with you." "Boom," cried Rob. "My head against 20 pennies. I'll cause a young fine fellow in the lid of them to breathe his last." And without more ado, he tried the string of his long bow, placed a shaft thereon, and drew it to his ear. A moment, and the quivering string sang death as the shaft whistled across the glade. Another moment, and the leader of the herd leapt high in his tracks and fell prone, dyeing the sword with his heart's blood. A murmur of amazement swept through the foresters, and then a growl of rage. He that had wagered was angriest of all. "Know you what you have done, rash youth?" he said. "You have killed a king's deer, and by the laws of King Harry, your head remains forfeit. Talk not to me of pennies, but get ye gone straight, and then not look upon your face again." Rob wailed within him, and he uttered a rash speech. "I have looked upon your face once too often already, my fine forester. 'Tis you who wear my father's shoes." And with this, he turned upon his heel and strode away. The forester heard his parting thrust with an oath. Blood with rage, he seized his bow, strung an arrow, and without warning launched it full athwart. Well was it for the latter that the forester could turn on a twig at the critical instant, for as it was the arrow whizzed by his ear so close as to take a stray strand of his hair with it. Rob turned upon his assailant. "How? Choice, nor to way. Aha! They's doing it! Ha! You shoot not so straight as I, for all your bravado. Take a hiss from the twopenny bow." Assajoy flew his answering shaft. The head forester gave one cry, then fell face downward, then lay still. His life had avenged Rob's father, but the son was outlawed. Forward he ran for the forest, before the band could gather their scattered wheats. Still forward into the great greenwood. The swing trees seemed to open their arms to the wanderer, and to welcome him home. Toward the close of the same day, Rob paused hungry and weary at the cottage of a poor widow who dwelt upon the outskirts of the forest. Now this widow had often greeted him kindly in his boyhood days, giving him to eat and drink, so he boldly entered her door. The old dame was right glad to see him, and baked him cakes in the ashes, and had him rest and tell her his story. Then she shook her head. "'Tis an evil wind that blows through Sherwood," she said. "The poor disparaged and the rich ride over their bodies. My 3 sons have been outlawed for shooting king's deer to keep us from starving, and now hide in the wood. And they tell me that Tos Corcora's good men is ever drew bar were in hiding with them." "When they, crew and mother," cried Rob. "By my faith, I will join men." Nay, replied the old woman at first. But when she saw that there was no other way, she said, "My sons will visit me tonight. Stay you here and see them if you must." So Rob stayed willingly to see the widow's sons that night, for they were men after his own heart. Then when they found that his mood was with them, they made him swear an oath of fealty, and told him the land of the beyond, a place he knew right well. Finally one of them sighed. "The band lacks a meter. One who can use his head as well as his hand. So we have agreed that he who is skilled enough to go to Nottingham and outlaw, and then the prize at archery shall be our launch chief." Rob sprang to his feet, said in good time, "Cried he. For I had started to that self-same fair, and all the foresters, and all the sheriff's men in Christendom shall not stand between me in the center of their target. Blood Dally was but buried behind his step tired at that's what they with a larkasy. If you win the golden arrow, you shall be chief of outlaws in Sherwood Forest." So Rob fell to planning how he could disguise himself to go to Nottingham Town, for he knew that the foresters had had men set a price on his head in the marketplace. That was even as Rob had surmised. The sheriff of Nottingham posted a reward of £200 for the capture, dead or alive. of one Robert Fitzoof, outlaw, and the crowds thronging the streets upon that busy fair day often pause to read the notice and talk together about the death of the head forester. But what with wrestling bouts and band-quarter stays and wandering minstrels, there came up so many other things to talk about that the reward was forgotten for the nonce, and only the foresters and sheriff's men watched the gates with diligence. The sheriff did spring his hatred of the father had descended to the son. The great event of the day came in the afternoon. It was the archers' contest for the golden arrow, and 20 men stepped forth to shoot. Among them was a beggar man, a sorry-looking fellow with leggings of different colors and brown scratched face and hands. Over a tiny shock of hair, he had a hood drawn, much like that of a monk. Slowly, he came to his place in the line, while the mob shouted in derision that the contest was open to all comers, so no man said him nay. Side by side with Rod, for it was Hayskilled, a muscular fellow of swarthy visage, and with one eye hid by a green bandage. Them also the crowd cheered, but he passed them by with indifference while he tried his brow with practiced hand. A great crowd had assembled in the amphitheater enclosing the lists. All the gentry and populace of the surrounding country were gathered in eager expectancy. The central box contained a lean but pompous sheriff, his bejeweled wife, and their daughter, a supercilious young woman enough, who, it was openly hinted, was hoping to receive the golden arrow from the victor, and thus be crossed between God. Next to the sheriff's box was one occupied by the fat Bishop of Hereford, while on the other side was a box wherein sat a girl whose dark hair, dark eyes, and fair features caused Rob's heart to leap. Marian. She had come up for a visit from the Queen's Court in London town, and now sat demurely by her father, the Earl of Huntingdon. If Rob had been grimly resolved to win her before, the sight of her sweet face multiplied his determination a hundredfold. He felt his muscles tightening into bands of steel, tense and true. Then trumpets sounded, and the crowd became silent while the herald announced the terms of the contest. The lists were open to all comers. The first target was to be placed at 30 yards distance, and all those who hit its center were allowed to shoot at the second target, placed 10 yards farther off. The third target was to be removed yet farther, until the winner was proved. The winner was to receive the golden arrow, and a place with the king's foresters. He was also who crowned the queen of the day. The trumpet sounded again, and the archers prepared to shoot. Rob looked to a string, while the crowd smiled and whispered at the odd figure he cut, with his vicatored legs and little cape. But as the first man shot, they grew silent. The target was not so far, but that 12 out of the 20 contestants reached its inner circle. Rob shot 6th in the line and landed fairly, being rewarded by an approving grunt from the man with the green blinder, who shot 7th, and with apparent carelessness, yet true to the bull's eye. The mob cheered, yelled themselves hoarse at this even marksmanship. The trumpet sounded again, and a new target was set up at 40 yards. The first 3 archers again struck true, amid the loud applause of the onlookers, for they were general favorites expected to win. Indeed, it was whispered that each was backed by one of the 3 dignitaries of the day. The 4th and 5th archers barely grazed the center. Rob fitted his arrow quietly, and with some confidence sped unerringly toward the shining circle. The beggar, beyond the crowd bounced duel to the beggar, and another bull for the beggar. In truth, his shaft was nearer the center than any of the others, but it was not so near that minder was the man had promptly christened his neighbor, did not place his shaft just within the mark. Again the crowd cheered wildly. Such shooting as this was not seen every day in Nottingham town. The other archers in this round were dazed to death by the preceding shots, were unable to keep the pace. They missed one after another and dropped muddily back, while the trumpet sounded for the 3rd round, and a target was set up 50 yards distant. "By my halidom, you draw a good bow, you master," said Rob's queer comrade to him in an interval allowed for rest. "Do you wish me to shoot first on this trial?" "Nay," said Rob, "but you are a good fellow by this token, and if I win not, I hold he may keep the prize from yon strutters." And he nodded scornfully to the 3 other archers who were surrounded by their admirers and were being made much of the sharers. From them his eye wandered toward Maid Marian's booth. She had been watching him, it seemed, for their eyes and hers were hastily averted. "Blinders quick." I followed those of Rob. "The fair maid, that," he said smilingly. "The one more worthy the golden arrow, and Sheriff's haughty." Miss Mudd looked at him swiftly, and saw naught but kindliness in his glance. "You are a shrewd fellow, and I like you well," was his only comment. Now the archers prepared to shoot again, each with some little care. The target seemed hardly larger than the inner ring had looked at the first trial. The first 3 sped their shafts, and while they were fair shots, they did not more than graze the inner circle. Rob took his stand with some misgiving. Some flecking clouds overhead made the light uncertain, and a handful of winged fowl linked across the range in a way quite disturbing to a bowman's nerves. His eyes wandered for a brief moment to the box wherein sat the dark-eyed girl. His heart leapt. She met his glance and smiled at him reassuringly. In that moment he felt that she knew him despite his disguise and looked at him to keep the honor of old Sherwood. He drew his bow firmly, and, taking advantage of a momentary lull in the breeze, launched the arrow straight and true as singeing across the range to the center of the target. The bull, while the fickle mob, who for jeering him were now his warm friends. "Can you beat that blinder?" The last archer smiled scornfully for me and made ready. He drew his bow with ease and grace, and, without seeming to study the course, released the winged arrow. Forward it leapt toward the target, and all eyes followed its flight. A loud uproar broke forth when it alighted, just without the center and grazing the shaft sent by Rob. The stranger made a gesture of surprise when his own eyes announced the result to him, but saw his error. He had not allowed for the fickle gust of wind which seized the arrow and carried it to one side. But for all that, Hugh was the first to congratulate the victor. "I hope we may shoot again," quoth he. "In truth, I care not for the golden bauble and wish to win it in despite of the sheriff, for whom I have no love. Now crown the lady of your choice." And turning suddenly, he was lost in the crowd, before Rob could utter what it was upon his lips to say, that he would shoot again with him. And now the herald summoned Rob to the sheriff's box to receive the prize. "You're a curious fellow enough," said the sheriff, biting his lip coldly. "Why, you shoot well. What name go you by?" Marian sat near and was listening intently. "I am called Rob the Stroller, my lord sheriff," said the archer. Marian leaned back and smiled. "Rob the Stroller, with a little attention to your skin and clothes. You would not be so bad a man," said the sheriff. "How like you the idea of entering my service?" "Rob the Stroller has never been a free man, my lord, and desires no service." The sheriff's brow darkened, yet for the sake of his daughter and the golden arrow, he dissembled. "Rob the Stroller, said he. Here is the golden arrow which has been offered to the best of archers this day. You are awarded the prize. See that you bestow it worthily." This point fair obliged Rob and half inclined his head toward the sheriff's daughter, who sat with a thin smile upon her lips. Rod heeded him not. He took the arrow and strode to the next box where sat Maid Marian. "Lady," he said, "were I accept this little pledge from a poor stroller, who would devote the best shacks in his quiver to serve you, with the right thing to do." Wabbing the hood, replied she with a roguish twinkle in her eye, and she played, The queen. The sheriff glowered furious upon this ragged archer who had refused his service, taken his prize without a word of thanks, and snubbed his daughter. He would have spoken, but his proud daughter restrained him. He called to his guard and bade them watch the beggar, but Rob had already turned swiftly, lost himself in the throng, and headed straight for the town gate. That same evening, within a forest, glided a group of men. Sun. Trus Kosa Clad, Minging Green. Surround of fire roasting venison in necking. Suddenly a twig crackled, and they sprang to their feet and seized their weapons. Look for the widow's sons, a clear voice said. Then I come along. Once to me the three men stepped forward. 'Tis Rob. They cried. They come to Sherwood Forest, Rob, and all the men came and greeted him, for they had heard his story. The men of the widow's sons, Stabwill, stepped forth and sighed. Thou reads all? You know that our band is sadly lacked a leader. On no birth, breeding, and skill. But we have found that leader in this young man, and I and my brothers have told him that the band would choose that one who should bring the sheriff to shame this day and capture his golden arrow. Is it not so? Again, give assent. We'll turn to Rob. What news bring you from Nahamtai? Rob laughed. In truth, I brought the sheriff to shame for mine own pleasure, and won his golden arrow to boot. That as to the prize, ye must aim in word, for I bestowed it upon him I. There seeing the men stood and doubted this, he continued, but I'll gladly join your band, and you'll take me as a common archer, for there are others older and mayhap more skilled than I. Then stepped one forward from the rest, a tall swarthy man, and Rob recognized him as the man with the green blinder. Only this was now removed, and his freed eye gleamed as stoutly as the other one, Rob in the hood. For such the lady called you, said he, I can vouch for your tale. You shamed the sheriff, Einam, as I had hoped to do, and we can forego the golden arrow, since it is in such fair hands. As to your shooting and mine, we must let future days decide. But here I will stubly declare that I will serve none other chief save only you. But Ingrid will stubly told the outlaws of Rob's deeds, and given his hand of fealty. And the widow's sons did likewise, while the other members, everyone, right gladly, because will sturdily adhere to Rob in the truest ball in all the company, and they toasted him in that brown ale, and hailed him as their leader by the name of Robin Hood. And he accepted that name because Maid Marian had said it. By the light of the bank's fire, the band exchanged signs and passwords. They gave Robin Hood a horn upon which he was to blow to summon them. They swore also that while they might take money and goods from the unjust rich, they would aid and befriend the poor and helpless, and that they would harm a woman, be she maid, wife, or widow. They swore all this with solemn oaths, while they feasted about the ruddy blaze under the greenwood tree. And that is how Robin Hood became an outlaw. Chapter 2. How Robin Hood met Little John. All that summer Robin Hood and his merry men roamed in Sherwood Forest, and the fame of their deeds ran abroad in the land. The sheriff of Nottingham waxed cross at the report, but all his traps and excursions failed to catch the outlaws. The poor people began to fear them, but when they found that the men in Lincoln Green, answered Robin Hood, but Torn meant them no harm. The despoir the oppressor to relieve the oppressed. They dined to have great liking for them, and the band increased by other stead hearts, till by the summer fourscore men who true had sworn fealty. But the days of quiet which came on grew irksome to Robin's adventurous spirit. Up rose he, one gay morn, and slung his quiver over his shoulders. This fresh breeze stirs the blood of my lads, quoth he. and I would be seeing what the gay world looks like in the direction of Nottingham Town. But tarry behind the borders of the forest, within earshot of my bugle. This saying, he strode merrily forward to the edge of the wood, and paused there a moment, his idle form erect, his brown locks flowing and his beard, it was God decided him to sit it. The highway led clear in the direction of the town, and thither he boldly directed his steps. But at a bend in the road he knew of a bypatch meeting across a brook which made the way nearer, less open, into which he turned. As he approached the stream, he saw that it had become swollen by recent rains into quite a pretty torrent. The log footbridge was still there, but at this end of it a puddle intervened, which could be crossed only with a leap, if you would not get your feet wet. But Robin cared little for such a handicap. Taking a running start, his nimble legs carried him easily over and balanced neatly upon the end of the broad log. But he was no sooner started across than he saw a tall stranger coming from the other side. Thereupon Robin quickened his pace, and the stranger did likewise, each thinking to cross first. Midway they met, and neither would yield an inch. The let go, roared Robin, whose leadership of the band, I am afraid, had not tended to mend his manners. The stranger smiled. He was almost a head taller than the other. Nay, he retorted, fair and softly, I give way only to a better man than myself. That way, I say, repeated Robin, or I shall have to show you a better man. His opponent budged not an inch, but laughed loudly. Now by my Odom, he said good-naturedly. He did not move after hearing that speech, even if minded toward before for this better man I had sought my life long. Therefore show him to me, and it please you, that will I right soon, quoth Robin. Stay you here a little while till I cut me a cudgel like unto that you have been twiddling in your fingers. So saying, he sought his own bank again with a leap, laid aside his long bow and arrows, and cut him a stout staff of oak straight, miss. But still it was a full foot shorter than his opponent's. Then back came he boldly. I mind not telling you, fellow, said he, fell about with archery. Would have been an easier way with me. But there are other tunes in England besides that the English sings. Here I've weighed the staff about his head by way of practice. So make you ready for the tune I am about to play upon your ribs. Have it you. 1, 2. Hoorah, roared the giant, smiting at him instantly. Well was it for Robin that he was quick and nimble, for the blow that grazed a hair's breadth from his shoulder would have felled an ox. Nevertheless, while swerving to avoid this stroke, Robin was poising for his own, and back came he for his whiff. Whack, hack, whack, parried the other. Whack, 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 whack. The fight waxed fast and furious. There was strength pitted against subtlety, and the match was a merry one. Mighty blows of the stranger went whistling around Robin's ducking head, while his own swift undercuts were feigned. He gave the other an attack of indigestion. Yet each stood firmly in his place, not moving backward or forward for a good half hour, nor thinking of crying laugh. No, some chance blow seemed likely to knock one or the other off a narrow footbridge. The giant's face was getting red, and his breath came snorting forth like a bull's. He stepped forward with a furious onslaught to finish this audacious fellow. Robin dodged his blows sprightly, then sprang in swiftly and unexpectedly and dealt the stranger such a blow upon his short ribs that he would have sworn the tanner was trimming down his hides for market. The stranger reeled and came within an ace of falling, but regained his footing right quickly. By my life, you can hit hard, he gasped forth, giving back a blow almost while he was yet staggering. This blow was a lucky one, It caught Robin off his guard. His stick had rested a moment while he looked to see the giant topple into the water, when down came the other upon his head. Whack! Robin saw more stars in that one moment than all the astronomers have since discovered, and forthwith he dropped neatly into the stream. The cool rushing current quickly brought him to his senses. However, he was still so dazed that he groped blindly for the swaying reeds to pull himself up on the bank. His assailant could not forbear laughing heartily at his plight, but was also quick to lend his aid. He thrust down his long staff to Robin, crying, "Hold of that, and your fists were not so much as your head." Robin laid hold and was hauled to dry land for all the world like a fish, except that the fish would never have come forth so wet and dripping. He lay upon the warm bank for a space to regain his senses. Then he sat up and gravely rubbed his pate. "Oh, by all the saints," said he, "you hit full stoutly. My hand's like a hive of bees on a summer morning. And seized his woman, which Rainier and blew thereon 3 shrill notes that echoed against the trees. A moment of silence ensued, and then was heard the rustling of leaves and crackling of twigs like the coming of many men, and forth from a glade burst a score or two of stalwart yeomen, all crowding milk and grain, like Robin, with good was Stutely and the widow Semsiker had. The master cried Will Stutely, "How is this? In sooth, there is not a dry thread on your body." "Nary, Robin. This fellow would not let me pass the footbridge, and when I tickled him in ribs, he must needs answer by a pat on the head which lab or makes lungs, Let's seize him, lads. Let him go free," said Robin. "The fight was a fair one, and I abide by it. I surmise you also are quits," and continued, turning to the stranger with a twinkling eye. "I am content, Nair," said the other, "for really you now have the best end of the cudgel. Wherefore, like you well, and would fain know your name." "Right," said Robin. "My men, even the sheriff of Nottingham, know me as Robin Hood, the outlaw." Then I right sorry that I beat you," exclaimed the man, "for I was on my way to seek you, and to try to join your merry company. But after my unmannerly use of the cudgel, I fear we are still strangers." "Nay, never say it," cried Robin. "I am glad I fell in with you." "No, sooth, to say I did all the falling." With a mid general laugh, the 2 men clasped hands, "That you have not yet told us your name," said Robin, without him himself. "Whence I came, men call me John Little." "Enter our company then. John Little, enter and welcome. The rates are few, the fee is large. But ask your whole mind and body and heart even unto death. I give the bond upon my life," said the tall man. Thereupon Will Stutely, unloved at good jest, spoke up and said, "Children in our household must be christened, and I'll stand godfather. This fair little stranger is so small of bone and sorrow that his old name is not to the purpose." Here he paused long enough to fill a horn in the stream. "The hark you, my son, my standing on tiptoe to splash the water on the giant. Take your name on entering the forest, but to christen you John." Just the men roared long and loud. "They give him a bow, and find a full sheath of arrows for Lil John," said Robin joyfully. "Then you shoot as well as fence with the staff, my friend. I have raked an ash twig at 40 yards, said Little John. Thus chatting pleasantly, the band turned back into the woodland and sought their secluded dell, where the trees were the thickest, the moss was the softest, and a secret path lead to a cave, at once a retreat and a stronghold. Here, under a mighty oak, they found the rest of the band. Some of them had come in with a brace of fat does, and here they built a ruddy fire and sat down to the meat and ale. Robin Hood in the center, with Will Stutely on the one hand and Little John on the other. And Robin was right well pleased with the day's adventure, even though he had got a drubbing for sore ribs and heads while ill, and named his neck every day that one can find a recruit as stout of bone and true soul as Little John. Chapter 3. How Robin had turned butcher and butcher and entered the sheriff's service. The next morning the weather had turned hail, and Robin home his bed and stayed close to their dry and friendly cave. The third day brought a diversion in the shape of a trap by a roving party of the sheriff's men. A fine stag had been struck down by one of Will Stutely's fellows, and he and others had stepped forth from the covert to seize it, when 20 bowmen from Nottingham appeared at the end of the glade. Down dropped Will's men on all fours, barely in time to hear a shower of arrows whistle above their heads. Then and behind the friendly trees they sent back such a welcome that the sheriff's men deemed it prudent not to tarry in their steps. 2 of them, in sooth, bore back unpleasant wounds in their shoulders from the encounter. When they returned to town, the sheriff waxed red with rage. "What?" he gasped. "Do my men fear to fight this Robin Hood face to face? Would that I could get him within my reach once. We should see then, we should see then, we should see what it was the sheriff would see. He did not state, but he was to have his wish granted in short space, and you and I will see how he profited by." The 4th day, and the one following this friendly bout, Little John was missing. One of his men said that he saw him talking with a beggar, but did not know where they had gone. 2 more days passed. Robin grew uneasy. He did not doubt the faith of Little John, but he was fearful lest a roving band of foresters had captured him. At last Robin could not remain quiet. Up sprang he with bow and arrows, and a short sword at his side. "I must await in Nottingham town, my men," he cried. "The goodly sheriff has long desired to see me, and mayhap he can tell me tidings of the best and quarterstaff in the shield." "Listen, Little John." Others of the band beside him had let them go with him, but he would not. "Nay," he said smilingly, "the sheriff and I are 2 good friends to put out upon our meeting. But tarry ye in the edge of the wood opposite the west gate of the town, and ye may be of service ere tomorrow night." So saying, he strode forward to the road leading to Nottingham, and stood as before looking up and down to see if the way was clear. At a bend in the road here, a rumbling and a rumbling, when up drove a stout butcher, whistling gaily, and driving a mare that sped slowly enough, because of the weight of meat with which a cart was loaded. "The good morrow to you, friend," hailed Robin. "Whence come you, and where go you with your load of meat?" "Good morrow to you," returned the butcher, civilly enough. "The matter where I dwell. I am but a simple butcher, and in Nottingham I go my flesh to sell. 'Tis fair week, and my beef and mutton should fetch a fair penny." And he laughed loudly at his jest. "But whence come you?" "Oh, my yeoman am I, from Luxley town. Men call me Robin Hood." "The saints forfend that you should treat me ill," said the butcher in terror. "Oft have I heard of you, and how you lightened the purses of the fat priests and knights. But I'm not but a poor butcher, selling this load of meat, perchance, for enough to pay my quarter's rent." "Rest you, my friend, rest you," quoth Robin. "I'd so much as a silver penny would I take from you, for I love an honest Saxon face and a fair name with my neighbors, that I would strike a bargain with you. Here." He took from his girdle a well-filled purse and continued, "Would fain be a butcher this day and sell meat at Nottingham town. Could you sell me your meat, your cart, your mare, and your goodwill without loss for 5 marks? We heaven bless ye." "Good Robin," cried the butcher right joyfully, "accompany," and he leaped down forthwith from the cart. And more, laughed Robin, "we must change garments for the nonce. Take mine and scurry home quickly, lest the king's foresters try to put a hole through this Lincoln green." So saying, he donned the butcher's blouse and apron, and, climbing into the cart, drove merrily down the road to the town. When he came to Nottingham, he greeted the scowling gatekeeper blithely and proceeded to the marketplace. Boldly he led his shuffle horse to the place where the butchers had their stalls. He had no notion of the price to ask for his meat, but put on a foolish and simple air as he called aloud his wares. "Hark ye, lasses and dames, hark ye, did me come by? Come by, 3 quarts go for 1 penny, and a kiss is good, say I." Now when the folk found what a simple butcher he was, the crowd did around his cart, for he really did sell 3 times as much for 1 penny as was sold by the other butchers. And 1 or 2 serving lasses with twinkling eyes let his comely face so well that they willingly gave boot of a kiss. But the other butchers were wroth when they found how he was taking that trade, and they accordingly put their heads together. One said, "'Twas a prodigal and has sold his father's land, and this is his first venture in trading." Another said, "He's a thief who has murdered a butcher and stolen his horse and meat." Robin heard these sayings, but only laughed merrily and sang his song the louder. His good humor made the people laugh. They saw a crowd around his cart closely, shouting appropriatiously when some buxom lass submitted to be kissed. Then the butchers saw that they must meet craft with craft. And they said to him, "Come, brother butcher, if you would sell meat with us, you must even join our guild and stand by the rules of our tribe." "Narrators of his heart," said jolly Robin, "that a butcher will deny. I'll go with you, my brethren true, and as fast as I can cheer." Whereupon, having sold all his meat, he left his horse and cart in charge of a friendly hostler and prepared to follow his mates to the mansion house. It was the sheriff's custom to dine in various guilds of the trade from time to time on fair days, for he got a pretty profit out of the fees they paid him for the right to trade in the marketplace. The sheriff was already come with great pomp into the banqueting room, when Robin Hood and 3 or 4 butchers entered, and he greeted them all with great condescension. And presently the whole of a large company was seated at a table going with the feast. Now the sheriff bade Robin sit by his right hand at the head of the board, for 1 or 2 butchers had whispered to the official, "The fellow is a right mad blade, who yet made as much sport today. He sold one meat for 1 penny than we could sell for 3, and he gave extra weight to whatsoever lass would bust him." And others said, "He's some prodigal who knows not the value of good of a gods who promised to arrive in the feast." So, as I have told you, he placed Robin by his side, and he made much of him, and laughed boisterously at his jests. Though sooth to say, the laugh would come by easily, for Robin had never been in merry road. It was quit some jests, and put up about him so. Then my Lord Bishop of Hereford came in, last of all, to say a ponderous grace and take his seat on the other side of the sheriff. But Goliath's fat body showing up in goodly contrast to the other's own bones. After grace was said, and while the servants laddered him with the meat platters, Robin stood up and said, "Madam, and say I to my Lord Bishop's thanks. And now, my 5 fellows, be merry and drink deep. To shut up here. I go my way, though it cost me £5 and more. So, my lords and gentlemen, or spare not their wine, but fall to lustily. Or, here shouted the butchers. Now are you a right jolly solo, quoth the sheriff, but this feast is mine own. Albeit you must have many a head of horned beasts, and many an acre of broad land, to spend from your purse so free." "Neither have I," returned Robin, his eyes all a twinkle. "Broad hundred horned beasts and buy my bread brothers. That is why I have turned butcher. But I know not the trade, and would gladly sell the whole herd, when I could find a boor. But this," the sheriff screed, anger eyes. "Since this fool would be plucked," thought he, "why should not he do the plucking? 500 beasts, say you?" She queried sharply. "And I have 510 fat beasts by actual count that I would sell for a just figure. To him who will pay me in right money, would I sell them for 20 pieces of gold. Is that too much to ask, lording? Was there ever such an idiot butcher?" thought the sheriff. And he so far forgot his dignity as to nudge the bishop in his fat ribs. "Nay, good fellow," quoth he chuckling. "I am always ready to help any in my shire, and you cannot find a buyer for your herd at this just figure. I will buy them myself." But this generosity Robin was quite overcome and fell to praising the sheriff to the skies, and telling him that he should not have cause to forget the kindness. "Tut, tut," said the sheriff. "But 'tis naught but a trade. Driving your herd tomorrow to the marketplace, and you shall have money dough." "Aye, nay, excellence," said Robin. "That can I not easily do, for they are grazing in scattered fashion. But they are over near Gimble. None of them know they're from at most. Will you not come and choose your own beasts tomorrow?" "Aye, yet I will," said the sheriff, his cupidity casting his caution to the winds. "Tarry with me overnight, and I will go with you in the morning." This is a poser for Robin, since he liked not the idea of staying overnight at the sheriff's house. He'd hoped to appoint a meeting place for the other, but now saw that this might excite doubt. He looked around at the company. By this time, you must know, the feast had progressed far, and the butchers were deep in their cups. The sheriff and Robin had talked in a low voice, and my lord bishop was almost asleep, said Robin presently, and the words were no sooner out of his mouth than the door opened and a serving man entered bearing tray of mulled wine. Outside of the fellow's face, Robin gave an involuntary start of surprise, which was instantly checked. The other also saw him, stood still a moment, and as if forgetting something turned about and left the hall. It was Lil John. A dozen questions flashed across Robin's mind, and he could find answer for none of them. But how was Lil John doing in the sheriff's house? Why had he not told the band? Was he true to them? Would he betray him? But these questions of distress were dismissed from Robin's open mind as soon as they had entered. He knew that Little John was faithful and true. He recovered his spirits and began again upon a vein of foolish banter, for the amusement of the sheriff and his guests, all being now merry with wine. A song, one of them shouted, and a cry was taken up around the table. Robin mounted his chair and trolled forth. A lass and a butcher of nigh him agreed. "Brooks him for to wed," says he. "Whar give ye the meat, fair dame, and you'll give me the bread." Then they joined in the chorus amid a pounding of cups upon the board, with a hey and oh, and a ho, a hey nonny no, a butcher of Nottingham. While the song was at its height, Little John reappeared with other servants and refilled the cups. He came up to Robin, and as if asking him if he would have no wine, said softly, "Meet me in the pantry tonight." Robin nodded and sang loudly. The day was already far spent, and presently the company broke up with many droopy bows of the sheriff and little notice of the drowsy bishop. When the company was dispersed, the sheriff bade his servant show Robin to his room, and promised to see him at breakfast the next day. Robin kept his word and met Little John that night. The sheriff next dayed that Little John has been doing so much in the meantime that he must be allowed a chapter to himself. So let us turn to another story that was signs of in the ballads of olden time, and find out how Little John entered the sheriff's service. Chapter 4: How Little John entered the sheriff's service. List, and gentlemen, all ye that now be here, of Little John, it was man, good moth ye now shall hear. That had come around another fair day at Nottingham town, and folk crowded there by all the gates. Goods of many kinds were displayed in gaily colored booths, and at every gas street a free show was in progress. Here and there, stages had been erected for the play of the order staff, a highly popular sport. There was a fellow, one Eric of Lincoln, who was thought to be the finest man with the staff for miles around. His feats were sung about in ballads through all the shire. A great boaster was he withal, and a day he strutted about one of these corner stages, and draughted of his prowess, and offered to crack any man's crown for a shilling. Several had tried his skill with Eric, but he had soon sent them spinning in no gentle manner, amid the jeers and laughter of the onlookers. A beggar man sat over against Eric's stage and grinned every time a pate was cracked. He was an uncouth fellow, rugged and dirty and unshaven. Eric caught sight of his leering face at one of his boasts, for there was a lull in the game, because no man else wanted to come within reach of Eric's blows. Eric, I say, noticed the beggar man grinning at him rather impudently, and turned toward him sharply. How now, you dirty villain? Quoth he, mend your manners to your betters, or I by Our Lady, I'll dust your rags for you. A beggar man still grinned. I'm always ready to mend my manners to my betters, said he. But I am afraid you cannot teach me any better, and you can dust my yakutet. My yakutet, me mamak, cop, roared the other, flourishing his staff. What will I? Said the beggar, getting up slowly, with difficulty. It will pleasure me hugely to take a braggart down a notch, and some good man will lend me a stout motor staff. At this a score of idlers reached him their staves, being ready enough to see another man have his head cracked, even if they wished to save their own. And they took the stoutest and heaviest of all. He made a sorry enough figure as he climbed awkwardly upon the stage. But when he gained it, he towered full half a head above the other for all his awkwardness. Nathless, he held his stick so clumsily that the crowd laughed in great glee. Now each man took his place and looked the other up and down, watching warily for an opening. Only a moment stood they thus, for Eric, intent on teaching this rash beggar a lesson and sweeping him speedily off the stage, launched forth boldly, and gave the other a sounding crack on the shoulder. The beggar danced about and made as though he would drop his staff from very pain, while the crowd roared and Eric raised himself for another crushing blow. But just then the awkward beggar came to life, straightening himself like a flash. He dealt Eric a butt, and a blow, the like of which he had never before seen. Down went the boaster to the floor with a sounding thump, and the thicker people yelled and laughed themselves purple. For it was a new sight to see Eric of Lincoln eating dust. But it was up again almost as soon as he had fallen, and right quickly retreated to his own ringside to gather his wits and watch for an opening. He saw instantly that he had no easy antagonist, and he came in cautiously this time. And now those who stood around saw the merriest game of quarterstaff that was ever played inside the walls of Nottingham town. Both men were on their guard and fenced with fine skill, being well matched in prowess. Again did Eric seek to force an opening under the other's guard, and just as often were his blows parried. The beggar stood sturdily in his tracks, contenting himself with beating off the attack. For a long time their blows met like the steady crackling of some huge forest fire, and Eric strove to be wary, for he now knew that the other had no mean wits or mettle. But he grew right mad at last, and began to send down blows so fierce and fast that you would have sworn a great hailstorm was pounding on the shingles over your head. Yet he never so much as entered the tall beggar's guard. Then at last the stranger saw his change and changed his tune of fighting. With one upward stroke he sent Eric's staff whirling through the air. With another teeth in the hand, with a third broad swing, where the other could recover himself, he swept him clear off the stage, much as you would brush a fly off the window pane. Now the people danced and shouted and made so much ado that the shopkeepers left their stalls and others came running from every direction. The victory of the queer beggar made him immensely popular. Eric had been a great bully, and many had suffered defeat and insult at his hands. So the ragged stranger found money and food and drink everywhere at his disposal, and he feasted right comfortably till the afternoon. Then a long bow contest came on, and to it the beggar went with some of his new friends. That was held in the same arena that Robin had formerly entered. And again the sheriff and lords and ladies graced the scene with their presence, while the people crowded to their places. When the archers had stepped forward, the herald rose and proclaimed the rules of the game. That each man should shoot 3 shots, and to him who shot best the prize of a yoke of fat steers should belong. A dozen cunard bowmen were there, and among them some of the best fellows in the foresters and sheriff's companies. Down at the end of the line towered the tall beggar man, who must needs twang a bowstring with the best of them. The sheriff noted his queer figure and asked him, "Who is that ragged fellow?" "It is you that hath." "But not but." "No, so soundly cracked the crown of Eric of Lincoln," was the reply. The shooting presently began, and the target soon showed a fine reckoning. Last of all came the beggar in his turn. "By your leave," he said loudly, "I'd like it well to shoot with any other man. You presented a mark of my own placing." And he strode down the list with a slender-peeled sapling, which he stuck upright in the ground. "There," said he, "is a right good mark. Will any man try it?" But not an archer would risk his reputation on so small a target. Whereupon the beggar drew his bow with seeming carelessness and split the wand with his shaft. "Long live the beggar!" yelled the bystanders. The sheriff swore a full great oath, and said, "This man is the best archer that ever yet I saw." And he beckoned to him, and now, "Good fellow, what is your name? In what country were you born, Ephraim Burnham?" "Will you enter my service? I will give you 20 marks a year, above your living, and 3 good suits of leather, really good suits, say you." "Then right gladly will I enter your service, for my back has been bare this many a long day." "Oh, yea." Then Renaud turned him about to the crowd and shouted, "Hark ye, good people, I have entered the sheriff's service, and need not the yoke of steers for prize. So take them for yourselves, to feast withal." At this the crowd shouted more merrily than ever, and threw their caps high into the air. And none so popular a man had come to Nottingham town in many a long day as the same Reynold Greenleaf. Now you may have guessed by this time who Reynold Greenleaf really was then. So I shall tell you that he was none other than Little John. Forth went he to the sheriff's house and entered his service. But it was a sorry day for the sheriff when he got his new man, for Little John winked his shrewd eye and said softly to himself, "By my faith, I shall be the worst servant to him that ever yet had he." 2 days passed by. Little John, it must be confessed, did not make a good servant. He insisted upon eating the sheriff's best bread and drinking his best wine, so that the steward waxed wrath. Nevertheless, the sheriff held him in high esteem and made great talk of taking him along on the next hunting trip. It was now the day of the banquet at the butcher's, about which we have already heard. The banquet hall, you must know, was not in the main house, but connected with it by a corridor. All the servants were bustling about making preparations for the feast, save only Little John, who must needs lie abed the greater part of the day. But he presented himself at last, when the dinner was half over, when being desirous of seeing the guests for herself. He went into the hall with the servants to pass the wine. First, however, I am afraid that some of the wine passed his own lips, while he went down the corridor. When he entered the banqueting hall, whom should he see but Robin Hood himself? And we can imagine the start of surprise felt by each of these bold fellows upon seeing the other in such strange company. But they kept their secrets, as we have seen, and arranged to meet each other that same night. Meanwhile, the proud sheriff little knew that he harbored the two chief outlaws of the whole countryside beneath his roof. After the feast was over and night was beginning to advance, Little John fell faint of stomach and remembered him that he had eaten nothing all that day. Back went he to the pantry to see what eatables were laid by. But there, locking up the stores for the night, stood the fat steward. "That good Sir Steward," said Little John, "leave me to dine, for it is long for Greenleaf to be fast to." The steward looked grimly at him, rattled the keys at his girdle. "To Sir Parliament, miserable," quoth he. "'Men's late in the day to be talking of eating. Since you have waited thus long to be hungry, you can then take your appetite back to bed again." "Now by mine appetite, that will I not do," cried Little John. "Your own palm of fat would be enough any bear to sleep on for the winter. But my stomach craves food, and food in food it shall have." Saying this, he brushed past the steward and tried the door, but it was locked fast. Wearied, the fat steward chuckled and jangled his keys again. Then was Little John right mad, and he brought down his huge fist on the door pile with a sledge-chair blow that shivered an opening you could thrust your hand into. Little John stooped and peered through the hole to see what food lay within reach, when crack went the steward and his keys upon his crown, and the worthy danced around him, playing a tattoo that made Little John's blues ring. At this he turned upon the steward and gave him such a rat that his back went nigh too, and over went the fat fellow rolling on the floor. "To lie there," quoth Little John, "till he find strength to go to bed. Meanwhile, I must be about my dinner." And he kicked open the buttery door without ceremony and brought to light a venison pasty and cold roast, pheasant, good besides to hungry men. Placing these down on a convenient shelf, he fell to with right good will. So Little John ate and drank as much as he would. Now the sheriff had in his kitchen a cook, a stout man and bold, who heard the compass, and came in to see how the land lay. There sat Little John eating away for dear life, while the fat steward was rolled under the table like a bundle of rags. "I make my vow," said the cook. "You are a shrewd hind to dwell thus in household, and ask thus to dine." So saying, he laid aside his spit and drew a good sword that hung at his side. "I make my vow," said Little John. "You are a bold man and hardy to come thus between me and my meat. So defend yourself and see that you prove the better man." He drew his own sword and crossed weapons with the cook. Then back and forth they clashed with sullen sound. The old ballad which tells of their fight says that they thought nothing for to flee, but stiffly for to stand. There they fought sore together 2 miles away and more, but neither might the other harm for the space of a full hour. "I make my vow," cried Little John. "You are the best swordsman yet ever I saw. What say you to resting a space, and eating and drinking good health with me? Then we may fall to again with the swords," said the cook, who loved good fare as well as a good fight. And they both laid by their swords and fell to the food with hearty will. The venison pasty soon disappeared, and the roast pheasant flew at as lively a rate as ever the bird itself had sped. Then the warriors rested a space and patted their stomachs, and smiled across of each other like bosom friends. For a man when he has dined looks out pleasantly upon the world. "And now, good Reynold Greenleaf," said the cook, "we may as well settle this brave fight we had in hand." "Matrusine," rejoined the other, but first tell me, friend. Not save who can handle the sword best, said the cook. By my troth, I had thought to carve you like a cape on iron now. And I had long since thought to shave your ears, replied Little John. This bout we can settle in right good time. But just now I am the master of meat of you, and you can turn your stout blade to better service than that of this sheriff. The service will that be? Asked the cook. Mine, answered a would-be butcher entering the room, and I am Robin Hood. Chapter 5. How the sheriff lost 3 good servants and found them again. Make good cheer, said Robin Hood, sheriff, for charity, and for the love of Little John thy life is granted thee. The cook gasped in amazement. This Robin Hood, and under the sheriff's very roof. Now by my troth you are a brave fellow. Live, he said. I have heard great tales of your prowess, and the half has not been told. But who might this tall slasher be? We, men do call me Little John. Good fellow. Narration, or mental blue meat. I will enter your service right gladly. Spoke the man, said Robin, seizing him by the hand, that I must back to my own bed, lest some sleepy warden stumble upon me, and I be forced to run him through. Lucky for you twain that wine flowed so freely in the house today. Else the noise of your combat would have brought other onlookers besides Robin Hood. Now, if you would flee the house tonight, I will join ye in the good greenwood tomorrow. But, go master, said the cook. You would not stay here overnight, verily. It is running your head into a noose. Come with us. The sheriff has set street watch on all the gates since 'tis fair week, but I know the warden with the west gate and to bring us through safely. Tomorrow you will be stayed. Murray, that will I not, laughed Robin, for I shall go through with no less escort than the sheriff himself. Now do you, Little John, and do you, much the miller's son, go right speedily in the borders of the wood. You will find my merry men. Tell them to kill 2 fine harts against tomorrow eve, for we shall have great company and lordly sport. And Robin left them as suddenly as he had come. Comrade, then said Little John, we may as well bid the sheriff's reef farewell. But ere we go, it would seem a true pity to fail to take such of the sheriff's silver plate as will cause us to remember him, and also grace our special feasts. This will, said indeed. Thereupon they got a great sack and filled it with silver plate from the shelves where it would not at once be messed, and they swung the sack between them, and away they went, out the house out of the town, and into the friendly shelter of Sherwood Forest. The next morning the servants were late jester in the sheriff's house. The steward awoke from a heavy sleep, but his cracked head was still in such a whirl that he could not have sworn whether the sheriff had ever owned so much as 1 silver dish. So the theft went undiscovered for the nonce. Robin had met the sheriff at breakfast, when his host soon spoke of what was uppermost in his heart. A purchase of the fine herd of cattle, near Gamewell, that 'twas clear that a vision of them, purchased for 20 paltry gold pieces, had been with him all through the night in his dreams. And Robin again appeared such a silly fellow that the sheriff saw no need of dissembling, but said that he was ready to start at once to look at the herd. Accordingly they set forth, Robin in his little butcher's cart, behind the lean mare, and the sheriff mounted on a horse. Out of Nottingham town to gates open wide, they proceeded, and took the hill road leading through Sherwood Forest, and as they went on and plunged deeper among the trees, Robin whistled blithely and sang snatches of tunes. "Why are you so gay, fellow?" said the sheriff, for a sooth to say. The silence of the woods was making him uneasy. "I am whistling to keep my courage up," replied Robin. "What is there to fear when you have the Sheriff of Nottingham beside you?" Orose the other pompously. Robin scratched his head. "They do say that Robin Hood and his men care little for the sheriff," he said. Said the sheriff. "Then I'd give that for their lids if I could once lay hands upon them." And he snapped his fingers angrily. "That Robin Hood himself was on Ferry Road the last time I came to town," said the other. The sheriff started at the crackling of a twig under his horse's feet and looked around. "Did you see him?" he asked. "That did I. He wanted the use of this mare and cart to drive to Nottingham. He said he would fain turn butcher. Let's see." As he spoke, he came to a turn in the road, and before them stood a herd of the king's deer, feeding. Robin pointed to them, and the continued, "A herd of cattle, good master sheriff. How do you like them? Were they not fed and fair to see?" Sheriff drew rein quickly. "No, fellow, why you would I were well out of this forest, for I care not to see such herds as these, or such faces as yours. Choose your own way, therefore, however you be, and let me go mine." "I," laughed Robin, seizing the sheriff's bridle, "I've been at too much pains to cultivate your company to forego it now so easily. Besides, I wish you to me some of my friends and dine with me, since you have so lately entertained me at your board." So saying, he carved a horn on his lips and winged 3 merry notes. The deer bounded away, and before the last of them was seen, there came a running and a wrestling, and out from behind covert and tree came full 2 swarm of men, clad in in green, and very good you those in their hands of short swords at their sides, that they ran to Robin Hood and doffed their caps to him respectfully, while the sheriff sat still from very amazement. "Welcome to the greenwood," said one of the leaders, bending a knee with mock reverence before the sheriff. The sheriff glared. "That was Little John. I were the worth, riddled Greenwith," he said. "You have betrayed me. I make my vow," said Little John, "that you are to blame, master. It was me served of my dinner when I was at your house. But we shall set you down to a feast we hope you will enjoy." "Well spoken, Little John," said Robin Hood. "Take you his bridle and let us do honor to the guest who has come to feast with us." And turning abruptly, the whole company plunged into the heart of the forest. After twisting and turning till the sheriff's bewildered head sat dizzily upon his shoulders, the greenwood men passed through a narrow alley, amid the trees, which led to a goodly open space, flanked by wide-spreading oaks. Under the largest of these a pleasant fire was crackling, and near it 2 fine hearths lay ready for cooking. Round the blaze were gathered another company of yeomen quite as large as that which came with Robin Hood. Up sprang they as the latter advanced and saluted their leader with deference, but with hearty gladness to see him back again. That merry waggle Stubby was in command, and when he saw the palfreyed sheriff being leading like any culprit, he took his cloak and laid it humbly upon the ground and besought the sheriff to alight upon it, as the ground of Sherwood was unused to such dignitaries. "You best do yourselves, good fellows," cried Robin, "albeit I'm no cook, whom I see with us was preparing a feast worthy of our high guest. Let's have a few games to do him on but it don't behon set fluent and filled to myself and smites begging the cavos sat to him to alcohol and sense on poop. Custom on the sun subdatus old sack to us out of sight who so decide. First stepped forward several pairs of men armed with the backwater staff. the widow's sons among them. And so skillfully did they thrust and tarry and beat down guards, that the sheriff, who loved a good game as well as any man, had up to shut. Well struck, never have I seen such blows at all the fairs of Nottingham. Then the best archers of the band set up a small wand at 8 paces distant, and thereon they affixed a wreath of green, and the archers began to shoot. And they shot not through the garland without disturbing its leaves, and tendrils was fain to submit to a good sound buffet from Little John. But right cannon was the shooting, for the men had spent a certain time in daily practice, and many were the shafts which sped daintily through the circle. Nathless now and again, some luckless fellow would shoot awry, and would be sent whining from a long-armed blow from the tall lieutenant, while the glade roared with laughter, and then more hearty a guffaw was given than came from the sheriff's own throat, for the spirit of the greenwood was upon it. But presently his high mood was dashed. The company sat down to meat, and the guest was treated to 2 more disturbing surprise. The cook came forward to serve the food, when the sheriff beheld in him his own former servant, and me supposed was at the moment of this discovery, and Ellery at Nottingham. Much the miller's son grinned by way of answer to the sheriff's amazement, and served the plates, and placed them before the party. Then did the sheriff gasp and fairly choke with rage. The service was his own silverware from the mansion house. "You rascals, you rogues," he spluttered. "Was it not enough to defraud me out of 3 of my servants, that you must also rob me of my best silver service? Nay, by my life, but I will not touch your foot." For Robin had bade him pause. "Our mercy. Oh, he. Servants come and go, in married England, and so does service. The platters are, but you should do your worship honor. And as for your life, it is forfeit to her eagerness to buy my herd of cattle so cheaply. Now sit you down again, and make good cheer, sheriff, for charity. And for the love of Little John your life is granted you." So the sheriff sat him down again, with the best face he could assume, and soon the cook's fiends were disappearing down his gullet as rapidly as the next man's. And they feasted royally, and then at each other's cups until the sun had ceased to print the pattern of the leaves upon the forest carpet. Then the sheriff arose and said, "I thank you, Robin Hood, what I'm bettering. You did and would entertain me in Sherwood so well. Promises I make not as to how I shall requite. You when next you come to Nottingham, for I am in the king's service. So for the present the score rests with you, but the shadows grow long and I must away. If you will be pleased to pilot me to the road." Then Robin Hood and all his men arose and drank the sheriff's health. Robin said, sank within him, "I must needs do it once, do it more. That's a sin to and though would forget that you came with me today to buy a herd of horned beasts. Likewise that he who dines at the greenwood and must pay the landlord." The sheriff fidgeted like a small boy who has forgotten his lesson. "Nay, I have but a small sum with me," he began apologetically. "Word is that some gossip, questing Little John, for my own wage should also come out of it. Have ye mine, said he much? Mine, smiled Robin." The sheriff caught his breath. "By my troth, were all these silver dishes worth anything?" The outlaws roared heartily at this. "I'll tell you what it is, worship Robin. With 3 Robin, we 3 Ras servants will compound our back wages for those plates, and we will keep the herd of cattle free for our enemies and the king's. But this little tavern bill should be settled. Well, whatsome have you about you? I have only those 20 pieces of gold and 20 others," said the sheriff. And well it was that he told the truth for once, for Robin sighed out, Little John turned to the sheriff's wallet. "That's true enough," he said. Then you shall pay no more than 20 pieces for your entertainment, excellence, decreed Robin. Stickoi. Stoothly, man of Gleamwood. Bad. Echoed the others. The sheriff should swear by his patron saint that he will not molest us, said was Stutwin, and his addition was carried unanimously. So be it then, cried Little John, approaching the sheriff. Now swear by your life and your patron saint. I will swear it by Saint George, who is patron of us all, said the sheriff vigorously, that I will never disturb or distress the outlaws in Sherwood. But let me catch any of you out of Sherwood, thought he to himself. Then the 20 pieces of gold were paid over, and the sheriff once more prepared to depart. Never had we so worshipful guest before, said Robin. As the moon is beginning to silver the leaves, I shall bear you company myself for part of the way. That was I who brought you into the wood. Why you may protest against your going needler. Far, said Sheriff. That I protest. I am loath to lose your company, replied Robin. The next time I may not be so pleased. That he took the sheriff's horse by the bridle rein, and led him in through the lane, and by many a thicket till the main road was reached. Now fare you well, good sheriff, he said. Remember next you said to despoil the poor prodigal. Remember the herd you would have bought over against Gamwell. And when next you employ a servant, make certain that he is not employing you. So saying, he smote denied this han and off went the sheriff upon the road to Nine. That is how. You will find from many ballads that came to be sung at the sheriff's expense, and which are known even to the present day. That, I say, is how the sheriff lost 3 good servants and found them again.